Hello, my name is Mitja, and in this tutorial, we'll go through the concert sample project. Okay, so first things first, in order to experience this project in sort of full extent, you need LightAct 4.10 or later. You'll need something to receive MIDI signals, and you'll need something to send a timecode, MTC timecode, and that is what I'm using. So um, if you go to the devices window of LightAct, you'll see that I have one MIDI receiver, and if I click on refresh local, it's gonna find the loop MIDI port I created just before through the loop MIDI program. So now I'll click on receive, and the timecode, once I start emitting it, here will start to arrive into LightAct. So that's all good. Okay, so let's go through the project. The project is set based on this brief that is an imaginary brief, which sort of resembles a real brief you might get in one of your shows. I've split the project into two timelines. One is the intro timeline, which basically, according to the brief, is set to when you open the project, it's gonna start looping this Q1 section, which basically shows some welcome messages on the screens. Then in the brief, it says that there is a manual cue number 2, which will basically trigger a fade out and then display some countdown information and an intro video. Now, in order to go through this sample project, I would highly recommend you first go through the LightAct introduction video tutorial that is available on our YouTube channel. The link is posted in the description. Because in this tutorial, we won't go through every detail on how LightAct works. It is expected that you know the basics. The cue list window is a very useful window where you can basically manually control all the cues. So if you go to the brief, you'll see that there are three types of cues. One is manual, where you are, as an operator, expected to basically press a button to trigger it. Then is automatic, which basically is triggered automatically based on a timeline when the playhead is playing. And another one is called timecode, which basically is triggered whenever there is a specific timecode coming into LightAct. I've decided, and that's basically my personal decision, you might decide the other way, is to, in cue list window, display only the manual cues. You control which cues are displayed in this window with the use as cue flag. So if you want to display all the cues that in a particular show in a cue list window, even though you are not supposed to trigger them manually, you can just make sure this checkbox is checked in all the markers and sections. Before we continue, I just want to say one word about the layers. So most of the layers that you see here are created using a video layer template. Some of them are created using other layer templates. For example, this one it was created using the render time layer. Now, there is more information about layer templates, stock layer templates, as we call them, on our user documentation, and you'll get a link to this part of the user documentation in the description below. So let's start with the first song. At the moment, we just finished cue number 3, so LightAct is in timeline intro, paused at the end of Q2 section. And the brief says that when timecode 30 minutes comes in, we want to start playing cue number 4. So the way this is programmed is that all the cues that are for a particular song are in the second timeline. Now, what we need to do when this timeline starts to play is we need to stop the intro timeline. So there are two ways to do it. What I've done is that I've made sure that both timelines here are in the same timeline group. If two or more timelines are in the same timeline group, it means only one of them can be in play or pause mode at the same time. So what will happen at the moment when we start receiving the time code is that this timeline will start playing, and this one will switch to stop mode. There's another way to do it without timeline groups if you want, and that's using the control layer template called set timeline state. So here you can select a particular timeline like this one and make sure that it is set to the play state you want it to go. But in this particular case, we don't need it. So in order to start playing cue number 4, we need to start sending the appropriate time code, which I've programmed on the button number 4. So let's do it. Okay. So the moment the time code started to be received by LightAct, this timeline switched to stop, and this one started playing according to the brief. The section start TC times can be set here or actually also in the timeline properties here. Again, these syncing properties are described in more detail in our user documentation. At the moment, we are paused at the end of the Q4 sections. This is right after Q7. So now we are waiting for the time code 1 hour to start playing the section devoted to the second song. So let's do that. Like so, and LightAct is already started to play section Q4, which has 1 hour start TC time. You'll see that most fades are actually done with the fade in and fade out properties, but we also have some curve properties. You might also want to explore the various mappings. So you see that most layers are rendering to canvases, and some of them are rendering directly to video screens, and some of them are actually rendering to the thrower as well. We have one perspective thrower here in the project, which is this one. So please explore how the content flows around. You always need to look at the mapping variable of a particular layer, and if you double click on the canvas, you can see where a particular canvas is mapped to. At the moment, we are at cue number 9, and we are in pause mode because that's devoted for the artist chat. And Q10, 11, and 12 are manual, so that's why I've decided to use them as a queue in the queue list window. So whenever I want to trigger queue number 10, I just press here and then manually trigger queue 11 as well. And then after we reach the end of Q11, I'll also trigger Q12. So this basically concludes the song number 2. So here you see that we are using the curve editor in the layers to basically switch from grayscale to color, and we do this using where is it? probably here. You see these green um, flags? It means that this particular variable is at this point in time controlled with curves. And here I've basically adjusted the color adjustment variables so that we are transitioning from black and white to color. Okay, now we are paused at the end of song number 2, and we are basically waiting for the time code 1 hour and 30 minutes to come in to start Q13, which is the start of song number 3. Now, before I trigger this is an interesting generative template called Strobe, and it's basically designed to create a strobe effect, and you can read more about it in our user documentation. So let's trigger the appropriate time code like so. Okay, and then this part of the timeline starts to play. The entire timeline is based on time code, so it just keeps on running until the end. An interesting thing is here we are using another generative layer template, this one here, and it's called texture to mapping. And it's a very simple layer template designed to work with, to basically send a texture from one layer to another mapping. So you can use the same texture, in this case, a live camera feed, both to this one is rendering to one of this canvas, but this one is then rendering the same texture also to the main video screen and using the add blend mode. So that's why you get this nice effect on top of the main video screen. So this concludes this video tutorial. Again, for more information, if you are completely new to LightAct, I would suggest you go through the Introduction to LightAct video tutorial. And for all the additional information about layer templates, syncing properties, timecode, cue list, and so on, please refer to our user documentation.